A Labor senator has hit out at Qantas for waging a war on the middle class of Australia. Tony Sheldon accuses the airline of mongrel corporate guerrillaszip as they push to move 1,300 workers off their enterprise agreement onto individual contracts. And it comes amid record profit and record expensive ticket prices too. That senator joins me live now. Tony Sheldon, good to see you. Qantas,
good to see you too,
they are a
Laura.
monopoly. Is there any power to stop them from doing what they're doing?
Well, I think two fronts. One is the price gouging that's going on is absolutely shocking, and we're seeing the effect that it has on business, small business and large, let alone travellers trying to go to see loved ones or taking a holiday. There needs to be real consideration by Qantas on what they're doing, but also on the same front, they're not only gouging from the Australian community, but they're also gouging from their own workforce and spearheading, as you rightly said in your introduction, as Steve Knott from the Miners and Energy Employers Group said that us big gorillas are going to come after multi-employer bargaining that the government's proposing to uplift wages for a lot of middle-income earners in this country. That they've got Alan Joyce spearheading that attack. It's just disgusting.
But how would multi-employer bargaining affect the Qantas workforce? They already have a strong union. This doesn't really encompass them, does it?
Look, Qantas has a number of industrial agreements, but what Qantas has done in their negotiations, whether it be pilots, engineers, flight attendants, and of course their white-collar workforce, they're saying that if you don't turn around and accept the agreement, that we're going to put you back to the award. So 20 years of agreed negotiations over many decades that have been openly agreed to are now thrown out of the door, and you can receive a 50%, 60% wage cut unless you accept a 20 or 40% wage cut now. And what we've seen is extra hours, extra shifts, less of a break between shifts, and of course work outsourced. That mechanism's one of the reasons why we've seen middle incomes in Australia collapse.
Sure,
because
but
the system is broken.
I'm just talking about this current bill, Senator. I'm just talking about this current bill. I mean, multi-employer bargaining, what happens with this omnibus bill is not really going to change what happens at Qantas, am I right?
No, one of the things that does come within this bill, and that is that employers aren't able to just unilaterally get rid of their existing agreement. Like one of the things that we have, we're down now to 35% of Australians are on enterprise agreements, but 56% of that 35% are on agreements that have expired, and we're seeing the agreements, substantially getting less and less because employers like Qantas are leading the charge and leading the big corporations, the big gorillas, as described by Steve Knott, to fight back to say that middle incomes shouldn't be allowed across the economy and to improve. And you're rightly saying we've got 10 years of history, but looking forward, we do need to have a 21st century industrial relations system, and that's what this proposal is. It's not a throwback to 50 years ago or 40 years ago, because that is out of date. What is in date, and that is a system that deals with the economic pressures on families.
Okay.
And you point back, on Qantas, they've said, they're members of the Business Council of Australia and they're, ideologues, they could actually turn around and get a very successful business, as many businesses do, by working cooperatively with their workforce through multi-employer bargaining. It works in lots of places. They just have to have the will and not the ideology.
Okay, now we're looking at record profits from Qantas, but it's not translating into wage growth, from what I can see, and it's not translating into cheaper airline tickets for customers. So what is going on then?
Well, I mean, I've said it, and I agree with Steve Knott. These big corporate gorillas like Alan Joyce, are hoarding all the bananas and not sharing them out, either to the workforce or to the community. And what the problem is there is that with the strategy that they've adopted under the leadership of Qantas right now, which is a wonderful company, except the leadership is letting it down. They're a wonderful workforce, but they've been let down by this leadership as the country has. They're saying that they want to hold all the bananas.
You want Alan Joyce to be sacked or to step aside, but why would that change anything?
Well, I think what's quite clear, and that is that there has to be a change when talking specifically about Qantas and about this approach to enterprise bargaining and getting wages moving. He's been the outspoken person about what should be happening out there. He's one of the big corporate gorillas saying that. What should happen in the case of Qantas is that we're having an airline that's got an older fleet, they're not reinvesting, they're turning around and doing share buybacks. They've already done a substantial amount of share buybacks, close to a third since 2015. They're doing more next year. They're paying themselves executive salary increases substantially, and then also doing over the Australian community, both the flying community and also their working community in the aviation company. There is a need for, on the employment front, and that is to have laws that says that people like Alan Joyce can't operate that way. They have proper guardrails, but also as a company, it needs to have a rethink about how that company operates. And to say for so many using Alan Joyce as their spearhead on attacking not only the community values with his overcharging on and gouging, storing all those bananas to himself, but also the fact that he's attacking and being used as a spearhead. You know, double spear, this guy. You know, he's gouging the community. Sure. And he's gouging the workforce. Well,
let me play devil's advocate for a moment, because there has been wage growth in the private sector, including Qantas, at around 3%. The public service has seen the same, and we heard members of your government say they're not willing to go any further for the public service. So they seem on par there at the moment. And I think it is also fair to point out that Qantas did lose $7 billion over COVID.
Laura, there's a couple. It's a very important question you've raised, because it does raise that the real essence of what Qantas is saying, what they're actually doing. In the case just last night, a number of workers in flight attendants have just voted to go on to take protected industrial action at Qantas. Now, the problem that they've been forced to do that, they haven't had a wage increase for 4 years. Now, I understand, and we all understand, because those workers stuck by that company during COVID, even though we gave that company $2 billion, they laid off many, many workers across their business, even though we gave them $2 billion to keep those workers connected. Now we're finding that at the same time they're offering a 3% wage increase, whilst actually not giving them any wage increase for consideration for the last 4 years. And they're also demanding a whole series of allowances and shift changes and extra hours to be done. So in effect, as has happened with their previous agreements from Qantas, wages, even though they've paid a nominal increase of 3%, they've taken 20 to 40% off them in other allowances and arrangements that stand regards their proper hours. And this is the same thing they're doing with 1,300 white-collar workers. They're saying to the workforce in that white-collar area, if you don't abandon 1,300 workers that do the safety checks on planes, that do the check out our baggage, that are there when crises happen, if you don't abandon those to actually get rid of their overtime payments into the future, which will decrease their wages, decrease their rights, then as far as we're concerned, we'll sacrifice all of you.
Senator, we're running out of time, but I just want to ask you something. There's a little bit of a hidden message, I think, in what you're saying there. You're saying employees that do the safety checks on these planes are being dudded on wages. I don't want to verbal you, but that's essentially what you said. Do you think safety is being compromised, or would that go too far?
Look, I think the problem that Qantas made on its airline has meant that safety has been compromised, because you can't get rid of experienced people in baggage handling, and how to actually load those planes.
But this is pretty important,
to do the
Senator.
freight oversight.
This is pretty important. I mean, there's plenty of people that are anxious about flying at the moment because of the costs, but you don't think safety is being compromised at this point, do you?
No. When you get experienced people and you throw them out of the business in critically safety areas, then you are putting the safety of the airline at risk. And that's what's happening at the moment with this configuration of it all about moments of costs now, rather than actually getting them more productive, more capacity building, and retaining good quality staff within the business. When you take the low road, then that's what you end up with in an airline. The low road, and there's safety consequences as well as consequences for the workforce, and as we're seeing, a consequence for the travelling public.
Okay, thanks so much for your time, Senator. I don't think it's the end of that conversation. We will speak soon.
Thanks, Laura.